When analyzing a film, it's important to consider its socio-political background because the film's context often informs both the subject matter and the formal elements of a film, including, for instance, editing, soundtrack, camera work, and mise-en-scène. In The Second Mother, the focus on the family unit and the exploration of the internal domestic environment testifies to ongoing changes in Brazilian society, which have transformed previously demarcated social boundaries and spaces. So the Second Mother uses the space as a strategy to convey class conflicts. The interiors of the house are imbued with social meaning as they reflect a viewed hierarchical structure, which conveys that this family member, the second mother, Val, is in fact a migrant, poor, and ultimately a servant. Arguably a legacy of the slavery past, these women, inserted in an upper middle class household, often live in a small room at the back of their employer's house, namely the maid's room, in Portuguese, o quarto de empregada. The recurrence of the social demarcation in Brazilian society has shaped the very architecture and design of houses and apartments, which led to the creation of o quarto de empregada, the maid's room. Here you can see an apartment floor with the maid's room. It actually says quarto serviço, but that's the equivalent of where Val, the protagonist of The Second Mother, lives in the house. It's less common now, but in the past, having a maid's room was relatively standard for apartments and houses designed for the upper class in Brazilian cities, as maids would live with the family and take care of their kids full time. So here you can see a screenshot of Val in her tiny room, which is the maid's room, and her daughter, Jessica, who doesn't accept to be in the maid's room, asks to stay in the visitor's room. We will expand on how the tension between mother and daughter reflect changes in Brazilian society, but firstly, let's consider how the film uses camera work and space to establish that there is social segregation. So here you can see a screenshot that shows Val on the left of the frame within the kitchen and the family in the background having dinner. This frame indicates how Val is always confined to a limited space in the house. I quote here film scholar Thiago De Luca, who articulates how the camera work emphasizes demarcated social segregation in The Second Mother. According to De Luca, quote, Val is seen on the left of the frame within the kitchen, eavesdropping on the conversations taking place at the table in the background on the right. It is also freighted with symbolism, not only because it conveys clearly demarcated spatial separation between bosses and servants, but also because it reinforces, through camera work, Val's characterization as a subject without the possibility of social mobility. End of quote. So this idea of crossing over, going to the other side of the house, has a broader social context. Characters such as Val and Val's daughter, Jessica, they stand for an emerging class in Brazil, which started going to places that have traditionally belonged to the elite and the upper middle class, such as shopping malls and airports. Brazil, a country historically marked by its abysmal inequalities, saw a change around the time the film was made. At that time, there was a significant expansion of what constituted the so-called Class C, a new middle class with unprecedented access to consumerism. This expansion of the so-called Class C took place mostly during President Lula da Silva's 2 terms in office from 2003 to 2010 and during the presidential term of Dilma Rousseff, who was Lula's successor. She was also from the Workers' Party. When the film was made in 2015, Brazilian economy was gaining strength. Rio de Janeiro won its bid to host the 2016 Summer Olympics. A boost in foreign investment and a wave of infrastructure projects created jobs. There were strong prices for commodity exports such as soya beans, and there was also the creation of social programs which helped narrow the gap between rich and poor. So here you can see some BBC headlines from 2011 and 2013 announcing this change. A headline from 2011 announces that Brazil is divided over an emerging middle class. So as Brazil's economy keeps growing, a record number of Brazilians are heading to the country's tropical beaches on package holidays. But not everyone welcomes the invasion of tourists or what that change symbolizes: the rising affluence and aspirations of Brazil's expanding middle class. Here, pay attention to the term invasion. Brazil's precarious new middle class demands more. This is a headline from 2013. So Brazil's so-called new middle class gained recognition worldwide as a symbol of upward mobility. But the wave of demonstrations that brought millions out to the streets in June has exposed the thin line that separates this group from slipping back into poverty. This is from BBC 2013. And indeed, when the film was made, that is 2015, these changes were recent and the social implications of those changes were also new. But now, with the recent crisis marked by the pandemic and the inflation, some of this so-called Class C was pushed back to Class D. If you're wondering how class system work in Brazil, because the middle class is attributed different letters such as C, D, it is the IBGE, which is the Brazilian Government Statistic Institute, that adopts an income-centered approach to define classes. Therefore, Val, the protagonist of the second mother, and especially her daughter's boundary crossing in the film, represents this perceived invasion of upper middle class spaces. And this boundary crossing in the second mother needs to be understood in the context of the social and economic changes that Brazil has undergone over the past 20 years.